All right. Good evening, everybody from Malaysia. It's 7 in the evening, and my name is Ravinder Kaur, and I'm the Scientific Director of Gaia. And this is my husband, Sanjitpaal Singh. He's the Visual and Art Director of Gaia. So a lot of the photos that you see in my presentation today were taken by Sanjit. So in Gaia, we have two local community guides, Halson Hassan and Amidi Majinun. And here we have Halson, and he's actually observing a helmeted hornbill nesting. And this guy actually is very good, very skillful with his hands. He's a carpenter, and with his dad, he's actually built boats. So we asked we asked Halson to help us in the development of artificial nest boxes for the hornbills. And here we have Amidi. He's holding a hornbill preferred food plant that we plant in the Kinabatangan. So HUTAN is a local NGO that does their work in Kinabatangan. And they actually pioneered the Hornbill project in 2013. So when I heard about this project, I was actually looking for a place to conduct my PhD study. So I grabbed this opportunity, and I was very fortunate to spend the next 6 years of my life working with the local community in Sukau. And these are all the staff of the HUTAN team, the HUTAN NGO. So over the years, we have received international funding and support. We recently got the Conservation Leadership Award, and we were also awarded the Christian Marsh Award in 2020. So 2020 wasn't really that bad of a year for us, at least, in this sense. So let me take you to the project site now. This is a map of Malaysia. And if we zoom into the Kinabatangan Wildlife Sanctuary in Borneo, you will see that this area is the Kinabatangan Wildlife Sanctuary. And it's surrounded by oil palm plantation, and it's highly fragmented. Despite being so highly fragmented, it is home to 8 species of hornbills. So I'm going to talk about 10 species of hornbills because in Malaysia, we have 10 species of hornbills. I'll pinpoint the ones that are not found in Borneo. So here we have a beautiful wreath hornbill. They are known as Enggang Gunung, which means hornbill of the mountain. And that's where they usually are found, in the mountainous regions. And if I play this is its sound, its call. And here we have the Oriental pied hornbill. This is a very resilient hornbill in terms of they are everywhere in the Kinabatangan. We see them a lot, and they seem to be able to find places to nest. And they're also very, when it comes to their diet, it's very diverse. So they're not very picky when it comes to food. On the opposite spectrum of this would be the helmeted hornbill. Only a fig-eating bird, very particular about the type of cavity it chooses. Here is a male Oriental pied hornbill, and it's bringing a lizard to its cavity, and this is the cavity entrance. So you can actually imagine inside this area here, there's a female Oriental pied hornbill. This funny device here is actually a data logger. It's actually recording the ambient temperature and humidity. And we have a similar logger inside the cavity as well. And this was part of my PhD study to find out what is the internal temperature and humidity of natural hornbill cavities. So let's hear how they sound, the Oriental pied. Here we have the great hornbills. Great hornbills are not found in Borneo. And this hornbill was actually photographed in Langkawi, where we see large flocks of great hornbills. You can tell that this is a male hornbill because of its eye. And in this picture, you can see it's feeding on figs. Next up, we have the bushy crested hornbills. These hornbills are very unique because when they nest, they do it in a community, in a big group, in a large flock. And we have here female bushy crested hornbills, and you can tell this simply by looking at its bill. It's got two colors, yellow and black on its bill. If it was a male bushy crested hornbill, it'll have a pure black bill. They have the most magical sound to me. Okay, moving on. We have the black hornbills. Sometimes we call them the rock star of the hornbill world because they have a very coarse sound. And they look very much just like the Oriental pied hornbill. That's the sound. Very coarse sounding hornbill. This is the beautiful wrinkle hornbill. Compared to the female, the males are so much more colorful. And if you look at the female, they only have a little bit of blue on them. So let's look at the call. Let's hear the call. So it was very difficult for me to see wrinkle hornbills when I worked in Peninsular Malaysia, in West Malaysia. But in East Malaysia, in Kinabatangan, you can see them in large flocks. So for those who really want to see wrinkle hornbills, Kinabatangan is an excellent place to go to. Now we have the helmeted hornbill, one of the most rarest hornbills, and is also critically endangered. And you can see the tail is very long, and it has a solid casque. Compared to the other hornbills, it's more hollow, but the helmeted hornbill's casque is solid. It has a very bizarre call. So it gets faster. And it ends in a maniacal laughter. So it's very interesting. And you can hear this call up to 2 kilometers in the forest. This is another species of hornbills not found in Borneo. It's called the plain pouch hornbills. And these hornbills tend to fly in large flocks, and they look very similar to the reed hornbills. Here we have the white-crowned hornbills. This is a very unique hornbill because it's highly carnivorous. And in Kinabatangan, we've seen them, feeding on other insects, and we rarely see them on fruiting trees. They also have a very bizarre call. These hornbills are also getting pretty rare in the Kinabatangan. If you're lucky during evening boat rides, you will see these birds coming really to the edge of the forest, right by the river, and they'll, in large flocks, and they will sit there, perch there, and call out in the evenings. So next up, we have the rhinoceros hornbill. This is one of the most popular or most recognizable hornbills among Malaysians. This is pretty soft, this recording. So the rhinoceros hornbill is just like the great hornbill. You can actually tell the sex of the bird just by looking at its eye. So we have here the red eye is a male hornbill. And you can also see that it has a line, a black line, and that also indicates male. But if you look on the other side, The female has a more whiter eye and it's lacking that black line. So this is how you can differentiate the sexes for Rhinoceros hornbill. This is our currency, our 5 ringgit note. And on our currency, we actually have Rhinoceros hornbills, a pair of them. If you're ever traveling in Malaysia, take some time to check out our currency. It has beautiful things such as the Rafflesia flower too. So what's so unique about hornbills? They're cavity nesting birds. And if you look at this picture here, I took this from Alan Kemp's book, Hornbills of the World. And this is an illustration of a female hornbill that has sealed herself inside a natural cavity. Even though hornbills need cavities, they can't make these cavities themselves. It doesn't matter that they have that large casque and that large bill, they can't excavate these cavities themselves. They actually have to rely on either natural processes. It could be fungal infection that infects the tree and over time becomes bigger, becomes a cavity. Or it could start off with a woodpecker excavating a hole, such as the great slaty woodpeckers. They're very large in size, and they can actually make cavities that might be suitable for other hornbills, such as Oriental pied hornbills, to use. So you can imagine that this process will take many years to happen, and to create this, suitable cavity for a hornbill. So it tends to occur in very mature, old growth trees. And in Asia, we notice a lot of these hornbill nests are usually dipterocarp trees, a very important timber tree for human beings. And now I draw your attention to this picture. This is a rhinoceros hornbill, and we can tell that it's a male just from looking at its eye, and you can see that black line on its casque. Can you imagine that a female of the similar size is sealed inside this cavity? She actually went in by putting one wing at a time. That's how she squeezed into this narrow cavity. And this cavity isn't narrow enough for them. They actually added on sealing material to make it more narrow because they don't want things like snakes and other predators to come in and predate on their eggs. So if you look at the sealing material, it's darker, and it's actually made from mashed up feces, fruits, and they also use things such as, they use other animals such as millipedes and centipedes because of the hard exoskeleton. They mash it up together and it creates this really tough sealing material that they can then paste onto the walls of their cavity entrances. So they are really remarkable in that sense. And each species has a different type of sealing material. Like Oriental pied, for example, they tend to use mud to seal the entrances of their cavity. And there's a lot of mud available along the riverbank of the Kinabatangan forest. So I'm going to play a very short video, it's just a couple of seconds, to show a wreath hornbill coming to its natural tree cavity, its nest. So a lot of hornbills, they use their tail, they open it up to brace themselves against the tree. Okay. So why are tree cavities so special? Why do hornbills nest in living trees, not dead trees? So studies done in Thailand by the Thailand Hornbill Project, they've actually put data loggers in cavities, and they also found what we found, similar to our results, and that the temperature is very steady throughout the day inside the cavity. It doesn't matter if it's in the middle of the afternoon, and in Malaysia it really gets hot, or early morning when it's really cool. The temperature is very steady inside a natural tree cavity. And why does this happen? It's because of the xylem tissues in the tree, drawing water from the roots up to the tree. And this movement of water, this constant movement of water, creates a very low temperature within the cavity and very high humidity. So this is one of the reasons why we see hornbills nesting in living trees and not often in dead trees. So when we want to build artificial nest boxes for hornbills to create more nesting opportunities for them, we try to develop artificial nest boxes that provide these temperatures and humidity conditions. So hornbills are frugivores. That means they eat a lot of fruits, but they also eat other birds and other animals. Here we see the diet, the fruit diet of hornbills, the Racemosa ficus, and this is eaten mainly by Rhinoceros hornbills in Kinabatangan, and it has many seeds inside it. So why do we need hornbills? What's so special about hornbills? Why do we need to conserve them? Hornbills are able to, because they're so big, right? They are able to consume large fruits. They digest the flesh, and then they regurgitate the seed undamaged because they don't have teeth. And they also cover vast areas in the forest. So as they fly around, they're actually spreading seeds. So they are excellent seed dispersers. And these are seeds that I collected from under a hornbill nest tree. And you can see that they're already starting to germinate once they've gone through the body of a hornbill. They also eat a lot of insects. And there are plantations in Kinabatangan that we see hornbills going into. They're visiting these areas. And sometimes they will catch, either they catch the beetles. And this is all the pictures of all the body parts of beetles that we collected under the nest tree of an Oriental pied hornbill. And you can also see that, strangely, they leave behind all the heads of the beetles. They don't consume the heads of the beetles. And they also consume things like snails. This is the shell of a snail. These are more beetles that we collected under a hornbill nest tree. And there's also a feather here. So it must have come from a bird that it consumed. So now I'm going to share with you a video to show how remarkable hornbills are when it comes to regurgitation. This hornbill is going to regurgitate a cicada, which is a relatively large insect. And it's actually keeping up to 5 in its gullet pouch. And you can also notice the ceiling material is very mud-like here, typical for the Oriental pied hornbill. So now I'm going to talk about one of the things we did in the Kinabatangan. For over 6 years, we followed a pair of helmeted hornbills that were nesting. And together with the HUTAN team, we observed this pair for over 6 months during the nesting season. And it's very interesting to see this, to be a part of this, the life of this pair. And we actually saw them have 3 chicks, 2 males and 1 female over the span of 6 years. This is the beautiful male helmeted hornbill flying right above us during the observation. And you can see it has a very long tail. It's so fascinating to see the helmeted hornbill and its affinity towards stick insects. In a day, it brought up to 3 to 4 stick insects to its chick and also the female that is sealed inside the tree cavity. This is very different from the other hornbills that we watch, where they usually bring other bugs like beetles and all that, but somehow the helmeteds just seem to prefer stick insects. And this is also a very rare photograph. It's hard enough to photograph the helmeted hornbill. But to actually capture a photo of it using its green oil gland is very fascinating. So this gland actually secretes oil and it applies that oil onto its body, and that gives it that tinge of yellow. It's antibacterial, and it also has, it's waterproofing for the bird. So water just rolls off it. So this is a male hornbill, helmeted hornbill. And if you look at the gullet pouch here, the red part, you will know that it's a male. If it's a female, it'll have a blue turquoise color. And this is the female helmeted hornbill that's sealing herself inside the cavity. So she's using feces and probably fruits that are mashed up together to seal herself inside a Shorea pauciflora tree. This tree is incredible. It's over 50 meters tall, and this cavity is 37 meters high. This tree is also endangered, and it's fascinating how a critically endangered hornbill is actually nesting in another endangered tree. And this female helmeted hornbill is going to give up her freedom for the next 5 months. She's going to stay sealed in with her chick, and she'll only leave 5 months later, a month before her chick is ready to leave. So over the 6 months duration, in the 5th month, she comes out and she starts to assist as well in the feeding activities, but not as much as the male. The male can make up to 11 feeds a day, going up and down, bringing food for the demanding chick as it grows. She will take on a more guardianship role. She will stay close to the nest, and she will actually lower and show her cask off to any other hornbills that come too close to her cavity. Cavities are really in high demand for hornbills, so they're very territorial and they're very protective of their cavities. And they actually come back to the same cavity to nest year after year. So trees with cavities are very important for hornbills. This is the helmeted hornbill chick looking out into the world. And you can see from the gullet pouch is reddish, so this is a male chick. And it actually has blue eyes in the beginning when it's very young. And we notice that when it's coming close to fledging, it will actually be more interested in its surrounding. It will look out, and especially it will look down as well to estimate distance, I guess, because it's going to take flight from this very high tree. You'll also know that there is a chick inside when you start to see the rim of the cavity full of all this feces. Usually the female, she will eject her feces out very well, but chicks, they're very young, they're less capable, so when they eject their feces, it tends to collect at the rim of the cavity. And it's the male's job to clean that cavity every day. And the male hornbill actually requires this kind of cavity to perch. It has a long tail, and it could be a vanity thing as well, because it needs to sit and let its tail hang. It also has a very heavy cask, so it's very difficult, if you think, for it to cling on and feed. So it prefers to perch comfortably and feed its chick. So we know that hornbills, they can't make their cavities, and once they find cavities that they like, they come back to it year after year. But sometimes they have to deal with other animals or other organisms that want these cavities as well. And here we have a picture of an Oriental pied hornbill at its natural cavity. It's feeding the female inside a cathetid, an insect. But the year after, that same cavity was taken over by wasps. So there's a lot of competition for tree cavities in the forest. So we all came together. It's not just a one man's effort, it's a global effort. We've all come together to try to create more nesting opportunities for hornbills. And here in this picture, you can see the Orang Kampong, which are the local villages, teaming up with scientists from all over the world. We have zookeepers from Chester Zoo, Buval Zoo, and Phoenix Zoo. all coming together. They used to come every year in March before COVID, and we will all come together and work together on trying to build proper, artificial nest boxes that are suitable for the hornbills. So it's really nice. This picture really captures how it's a global effort to help conserve hornbills. And like I said, every year in March, the zookeepers came down, and they have the advantage because they work directly with the birds. They are in the presence of the birds. People like me, we are observing wild hornbills from a distance. So when we come together, we can, exchange ideas and our knowledge, and we try to develop better artificial nest boxes because we want to get more species nesting in our boxes, especially in an area like Kinabatangan, where all those large mature trees that had cavities have been removed due to logging activities. So these are actually, we call them the phase 2 nest boxes. These boxes actually offer low temperature and high humidity, but they were very heavy. So artificial nest boxes are one way to help hornbills, particularly the large-bodied hornbills. But for the small-bodied hornbills, we realize there are cavities in Kinabatangan that haven't really matured yet to become hornbill nests. But we can, push this process forward a bit with a little bit of carpentry work. So, and a little bit of creativity as well. Here we have Halson. What he did is there was this tree within the village, and this tree was being visited by a pair of Oriental pies, but they never used it to nest. So he climbed the tree and inspected and found that the inside of the cavity, the flooring, was more than a meter down. So this is a method that was used, that has been described in other projects such as the Thailand Hornbill project, and they've been restoring cavities to make them hornbill suitable. So we try to replicate what they're doing here. So they advise adding soil, and that's what we did. We added soil until it reached to the entrance of the cavity. Halson also noticed that the roof of the cavity was too low, so he used the chisel to try to make the area bigger. The hornbill still didn't come, so we thought maybe it was because the cavity is too bare. Maybe we need to put a plant on it to offer it shade. So we put this bird's nest fern on it. Sadly, the bird's nest fern died. But what was interesting is because we had tied this fern onto the tree, the hornbill started using it as a perch. Turns out that one of the problems with this cavity was not only the flooring or the roof, it was too slippery for the hornbill to hook itself on. So it was using the wires that we used to put up the bird's nest fern to cling on and feed its mate inside. So this is a place called Labok Bay, and they have a Oriental pied hornbill nest that was abandoned suddenly. So we asked permission from the management, and we told them that we can go and probably restore that cavity for them. So here's a picture of Eddie, and he noticed that the cavity entrance had become too narrow and a hornbill couldn't fit anymore. So he just widened the cavity entrance. So we did this with 6 different trees that had cavities, and we were successful with 4. And those 4 ended up producing 9 Oriental pied chicks. So very little effort can go a long way when it comes to hornbills. We're always looking for hornbill nests, natural nests. There's so much we can learn from hornbill nests. We can learn its behavior, how is it perching, what kind of entrances it likes, because different species of hornbills like different entrances. And we can apply that knowledge when we make artificial nest boxes. So we're always looking for nests either on land or by using a boat. And we're always looking at their droppings, their feces. We want to know more about what they're eating. And any regurgitated fruits that fall, we pick it up and we can grow those fallen seeds. Because those seeds actually, when they fall to the ground under a nest tree, they actually aggregate and there's high mortality. So we actually give them a chance to survive and germinate when we take them away and plant them in our plant nursery. So within about 6 months, we tried to plant about 1,000 seeds, but we ended up with 270 seedlings. So like I mentioned, in 2013, before I even went to Kinabatangan, HUTAN had already pioneered the Hornbill project, and they started this by introducing 5 artificial nest boxes into the forest. We call this the phase 1 of the artificial nest boxes. And it's set for about 3 to 4 years vacant, not being used. An Oriental pied hornbill was the first to try to use it, and then the Rhinoceros Hornbill started using it. And it was featured in the BirdLife International article as the world's first. So we had 2 from the 5 artificial nest boxes used by the vulnerable Rhinoceros Hornbills. They are listed as vulnerable on the IUCN red list. And you can see here that this female is perched next to her chick. So from these 2 boxes, over the span of 3 years, we had 5 chicks fledged from these boxes. So nest boxes are great, but phase 2, they were really, really heavy. And it's not, you can't just put them on the edges of the forest. You need to take them, deeper into the forest. What is really the best thing for the forest is actually to preserve forests, especially old growth forests where you have, large trees with natural cavities. Because you can imagine the effort that goes into trying to replace a cavity. It's not easy. And once you carry the box all the way into the forest, away from the edge, you have to hoist it up at least 20 meters high. Only then you will get the larger bodied hornbills. And here we have the team, the HUTAN team, all smiling still. I don't know how they do it after all that effort of carrying, this large box up into the tree. And imagine after all that effort of putting up artificial nest boxes, sometimes other things nest in them. So when we opened up the box from the top, we saw this, alien structure inside. This is actually stingless bees. At first, we were disappointed when we saw stingless bees taking over these boxes. But then I came across a paper that said that stingless bees tend to nest in natural tree cavities. So it's nice in a way because, the hornbills are actually the stingless bees are actually taking to our boxes because they're offering that temperature and humidity that we are trying to aim for. Then we have some unwanted visitors. This was a mistake we made because we put the box on the branch. So when you put it on the branch, predators are able to access the cavity. So if this is the tree, we try to put it on the bark itself now, on the trunk of the tree, to avoid all these predators from easy access. This is really funny because this artificial nest box was built for helmeted hornbills. It has that protruding cavity. Within 1 month of putting it up, more than 30 meters high, this red giant flying squirrel called it home. We left it be. We're not going to chase it, but it's really shows how desperate these animals are in this forest. This is a regenerating forest, a logged over forest. And animals that need cavities are really in desperate need for these cavities right now. So phase 3 boxes are kind of like a mix of phase 1 and phase 2. So they are light, and they're also, the insulation inside provides the temperature and humidity that we desire. So I'm going to play for you a video. It's just like 1 or 2 minutes long that shows what we do and why hornbills need nest boxes. Okay, so I would like to thank all my supporters for the project. I mean, without you guys, we'll not be able to carry out this project. And I'd like to end my presentation today by encouraging everyone here to visit our website to find out more about our project. We also have a Gaia store where we're selling coloring sheets that features all the 8 species of hornbills in Borneo. All the proceeds go back to the project, and we're trying to raise funds this way. It's also a great time to sit down and color because of the lockdowns and the pandemic. So if you have any more questions, you can actually reach us either on Instagram or you can email us directly. You can also join our FB group, which is the Kinabatangan Hornbill project. And that's where we're very active to share updates of the project. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys.
Thanks so much, Ravin. There are a few questions in the chat. I'll just read them out so you don't have to poke around there.
Okay.
Any idea how many eggs are laid?
It depends on the species. Smaller hornbills, like the Oriental pied hornbills, can lay 3 eggs sometimes. The larger ones can lay 1 to 2.
And for great hornbills, what eye color is the female?
It's whitish also, just like the Rhinoceros hornbill.
And then what is the range of hornbills in the non-breeding season? Do they migrate at all?
We see that happening, local migration, we call that, with the plain pouch hornbills. It's quite obvious. We see them coming all the way from Thailand to, the northern parts of Peninsular Malaysia during the non-breeding season.
And then how do the hornbill females exit the sealed nest?
Oh, they actually break it. They use their bill like a chisel. They break it. They actually get tired in the process, and then they squeeze themselves out.
And one more, how old are the trees that the artificial nest boxes get placed on, and how old are the natural trees that would have suitable cavities?
The natural cavities could be over 80 years old, in really old growth trees. The ones that we're putting up the boxes in, they're very young. They're probably like 30 years old, and they're not very tall. So we always have a height issue. Our boxes, it's very difficult for us to put our boxes at 20 meters. It's a real challenge.
I can imagine you'd need to be good at climbing.
Yeah, but also because we're limited by this regenerating forest that is quite short in comparison to the primary forest where you get those really tall Dipterocarp trees.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. But we have a few trees that got spared here and there. So.
And then do they, I presume any species stay in the canopy, or do they forage on the ground as well?
So we see white crowned hornbill would come to the ground looking for insects and so forth. But like helmeted hornbill spends a lot of time in the canopy. And one of the scientists I spoke to thinks that might be the reason why they always find stick insects to bring back to feed to their chick, because they're always in the upper canopy level.
And then what is the purpose of the huge horn in quotation marks, I presume the casque on top of the bill?
So like for the helmeted hornbills, they actually use it to headbutt in midair. So it's a defense mechanism. But for the other hornbills, it's more to increase the sound, the volume of their sound, their calls, more audible.
There are lots of people commenting and saying amazing work. I won't read everybody's.
Thank you.
A big thank you for everyone who works on the project. How do they make the ceiling material for the nest? Is it prepared on the ground or just layering, or how?
So when I was observing the helmeted hornbill female, I think most of the things that she gets is from inside. That means it's her own feces, and she's probably even taking the insides of the tree. Because you can hear her really active inside the cavity. So she's getting everything from inside.
Interesting. I've watched yellow-billed, red-billed, and Bradfield's hornbills in southern Africa, and it seems as though they just take mud from rain puddles. But this is a different behavior, I guess.
Oriental pieds do that, and we do see males carrying pieces and offering it to the female to help her seal. So yeah, different hornbills, different species, different behaviors.
Somebody's asking, why are there different color differences in certain male and female hornbills? Is it to capture a certain wavelength?
No, actually, I am stumped because you don't see this across the board for all the species. Some of the species, they look so similar, just the eye color is different. But for ring-tailed hornbills, you get this really, really sexually dimorphism. One is colorful male and very simple-looking female.
So maybe I can also comment there that a lot of sexual dimorphism in birds, and given that it's Women's Day, I think this is an appropriate one. A lot of the sexual dimorphisms in birds are actually controlled by female choice. So the females may prefer the male to have certain characteristics, and choosing those characteristics means that they increase in frequency in the population. That's how it works. Yeah. How do you ensure the humidity in the nest boxes?
Thicker walls. Once you have very thick walls, and sometimes what we do is we rely on the growth of lichen and all that, because sunlight is absorbed by these things growing on the outside. It really helps the humidity inside, because the rainforest is very humid.
In very old large trees, how do more than one pair of hornbills nest? I think in the same tree, I presume that means.
So like,
Tom, if I'm wrong, you can just put another question.
So you mean, do they come back to the same? Is the same species coming back, or can this different species share the same cavity? Is that what you mean? Because like helmeted hornbills, we've seen them use the cavity, and then the following year when they didn't use the cavity, it was taken over by bushy crested hornbills. But in one tree is usually one pair at a time. Derek, did I lose you?
Oh, sorry, I'm talking away on mute. I'm muted so I could cough.
Oh, okay.
What is the weight of the nest box?
Oh, so the phase 2, the ones that were really heavy, were about 80 kilos.
Wow, that is heavy to get up in a tree.
Like putting a person up there.
Yeah, it's like lifting me into a tree. That wouldn't be easy. Lots more positive comments. Thank you for a great presentation, great talk.
Thank you for tuning in.
Have you seen the mating display?
No, I've never even seen them mate even. But they do engage in courtship feeding, usually earlier on in the season. So the male will bring a fruit, will pluck the fruit and pass it to the female. She will pass it to the male, and they'll go forth, back and forth, doing this for some time.
And then do you only supplement nest boxes in regenerating forests or also in undisturbed forest?
Only in regenerating forests. And the good thing about Kinabatangan is it's a sanctuary, it's a protected area, and Hutan has all these wardens doing patrolling. There's also the Sabah Wildlife Department that's doing a lot of work there, patrolling and keeping this area safe. So we feel very confident to put our boxes there because they're very obvious structures, and it can make the birds very vulnerable to hunters.
And then the last one so far is, have there been any cases of hybridization between the different species?
There has been, especially great hornbill and rhinoceros hornbill pairing up. I think there was an incident in Terengganu recently and also one in Thailand.
And which month is their breeding season?
It's very fascinating that in Peninsular Malaysia and Borneo, it's very different. But for Borneo, we see all the larger hornbill species tend to nest in June. But the Oriental pied, being a special species on it by itself, it starts nesting in November or December.
And then if a chick dies, does the mother eject the dead chick?
I actually watched a pair of great hornbills that had they were nesting, the female was inside, but she abruptly left the nest. She lingered, so I think her chick was inside and it died, and she just left it there. She lingered for some time, and then she had a gecko in her bill, as if like she had an instinct to feed something, but there was nothing there to feed. And the male was perched far away, and he was calling her, as if to encourage her to leave. So I think they just leave it there.
So I have a question now from my own perspective, and I'm curious as to whether you've ever put monitoring cameras inside the artificial nest boxes to see what goes on inside there.
We realized that these hornbills are really sensitive when you put camera traps. When we put camera traps at the artificial nest boxes, the first picture is the hornbill at the cavity, and the second picture is it right at the camera. So we feel like they're very distracted by these cameras. But yeah, eventually, if we can find someone who can fund this part of the project, it'll be great. Something small, maybe we can put in the box. So yeah.
Yeah, I imagine you could probably use a very, very tiny camera.
Yeah.
That might be easy to disguise, but yeah, interesting.
I lost a lot of this. They do not like this.
So they chuck them out, do they?
Yes, and not only them, even the monkeys.
Okay. Yeah. It's a complicated environment to work in, I would imagine. Yeah. And I think that's the last of the questions. I think there's a few more people saying wonderful talk, fantastic photos. Thanks for the great talk, and love listening to the calls. I think it's great that you were able to play the calls because this is something we don't get very often in webinars. And it's very interesting to be able to hear what they sound like.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Apologies, some of the recording was a bit soft. I don't know what happened there.
I was able to hear them all, so yeah. Yeah, so I think that's it, and I think that's it for the questions. And thanks so much for doing this talk for us, Ravin.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
And for those who have the time and can be in the right time zone, at 7 o'clock this evening in South African time, we have another webinar on the evolution of birds. So feel free to pop into that one as well. And thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Enjoy the rest of your day or evening, whatever is left for you. Take care.